So, hello, my name is Tom and I'm the Minister of St John's, Downshire Hill in Hampstead. And this is the first of our COVID conversations where we are inviting a different speaker each week to just have a chat about different things to do with which arise because of the current situation with coronavirus and the different issues that creates, and particularly thinking about that from a Christian perspective and what the Bible says about these things. I'm delighted this evening to welcome Jeremy Marshall, and he's with me here on the screen, and we are going to be having a chat. The way it's going to work is that I'm going to interview him for a bit, and if as we go a question comes to you, please do comment in the live chat, which is on YouTube, and put a question there, and we'll do our best to put that directly to Jeremy. Now, Jeremy has made it very clear you can ask any question you like, no problems with any questions at all, any question you like about anything, and he will be glad to take it. I guess if we have too many questions, we won't get through them all, but hopefully we'll be able to do our best with them. But I'll just start. I've got a few questions to get going with, but don't wait for me to prompt you. Just write a question in the chat and we'll get to it probably after about 20 minutes or so, but we'll see how we go. So, hello, Jeremy. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. And Jeremy, why don't you start by just telling us a bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I'm in Sevenoaks in Kent. We've got married to Jeanette. We've got 3 adult children, 2 of whom are here, eating us out of house and home. And yeah, I've been in lockdown like everybody, but we'll come on to my rather complex medical history in a minute. But in the last few weeks, I haven't been here. I've been in hospital mainly. And actually right now, as everybody else is starting to come out of lockdown, I'm having to go further in. I used to work in the city. I was even a banker, right? Terrible profession. And my last job was chief executive of a family-owned private bank called C. Hoare & Co., which I imagine in Hampstead, a number of your well-heeled parishioners are familiar with, but your secret's safe with me. It's a very old family-owned private bank, 350 years old, still owned by the same family. And I was fortunate enough to be the first ever non-family chief executive, which was great fun. We've got a very beautiful building in Fleet Street. I've been there since 1690. It's got courtyards and fountains and old masters. So yeah, it was kind of a dream job, really, Tom. And
so you were doing that, and then what happened?
Yeah, one day my life changed forever. 7, 8 years ago, in the shower, I found a tiny lump like a little pea on my ribs. I went to the GP, who said, "Oh, it's nothing to worry about, it's just a fatty lump." But maybe some of the people watching, you've been through this, you get referred then to check it out. And I got referred, and eventually I got referred to the Marsden, which only does one thing, cancer. So even the most stupid person like me could figure out, okay, you had cancer. But the prognosis was reasonable. This was 2013, so 7 years ago now. And they said, you've got this very rare type of cancer. It's called a sarcoma. It's like a soft tissue cancer. We should be able to deal with it. So I went through treatment. And then for about 2 years, everything went back to normal. I thought after this 6 months of treatment, it was just a scare. And then almost exactly to the day, 5 years ago, I was at a friend's house here in Sevenoaks. I went to adjust my collar. It was a hot evening. We were having a meal. And as I did it, I felt this massive lump on my collarbone, not like a pea, but like a golf ball. And within a few seconds, my life changed forever. So I went back to the hospital. I was sitting in the waiting room, and they said, "Please come through." And the nurse, as we were walking down the corridor, said, "I'm really sorry." And that was the only warning I had, because the oncologist in the room said, "Look, we're not quite sure how we missed this in our screening, but you've got tumors everywhere, and we can't cure you." And of course, the next question you ask is, "Well, how long do you think I've got?" And they said, "Well, probably 18 months. So yeah, I burst into tears. Please don't think I'm some kind of expert on cancer or anything. I'm not an expert on anything. It's been really, really hard. I've been on a sort of one-man mission, Tom, to sort of absorb any spare capacity in the NHS. So as well as basically I've had 25 chemotherapies. I'm in chemo now, radiotherapy, operations. I lost the sight in both eyes, which was quite tough. And then in the last few weeks, having done oncology and ophthalmology, I've got eyesight back in one eye. Then I thought I'd go on to cardiology. I'm keen to explore all the medical profession. So I got, a few weeks ago, I got a high fever and I got chest pains. So I thought I probably had coronavirus. I went back to the hospital. They ran all the tests. They haven't actually found what the issue is. In fact, tomorrow I've got the debrief from the cardiologist. So I've been through lots of tests. It could be the side effects of cancer treatment. It could be what's called pericarditis, which is inflammation of the sort of area around the heart. And while I was back in hospital, they did a scan and then they said, okay, your tumors have grown, so you've got to restart. So last Thursday, yeah, I spent 14 hours in hospital having a cardiac MRI, all kinds of kidney tests, and then chemotherapy. So yeah, it's kind of a happy life, keeping the medical profession on their toes.
And I mean, it's enough to crush anybody, in terms of certainly emotionally and psychologically. What has been your response to that, as a human being?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest impact of cancer, or all the other things I've had, has been the impact on your loved ones. And that's hard because you're kind of spreading grief to have to go home from hospital and tell my children who are at university, look, I'm going to die, even though obviously I'm still alive, was and is very hard. But I would say the biggest emotion I feel, Tom, is fear. And for the last 5-7 years, I feel like I'm living with the sword of Damocles over my head, because I don't know how long I might die in a few months, or I might not. And fear comes also when you're on public transport. For example, when I heard people coughing or sneezing, I felt afraid because I have no immune system. And now I would say to everybody watching, welcome to my world, because what I've been going through for 5 years is what everyone's going through. So yeah, I am afraid of dying and of death, because it's an ugly thing. What keeps me going is the presence of Jesus Christ. And just to give you an example, this time last week, I was in there are many things I don't like about medical treatment. One thing I don't like is MRIs, because it feels like you're in a coffin, and you've got the kind of tube right over your face. And I was in there for an hour, and you can't move, and you feel like you're buried alive, basically. And then I remembered, as I felt afraid, I remembered the words of Jesus: look, I'm with you always, even to the very end of the age, even in an MRI machine. Or maybe the most famous chapter in the Bible, the 23rd Psalm, has a verse that says this: yes, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you're with me. That's been my experience. If we're Christians, God doesn't promise to build us a bypass. There's no M25 to avoid going through death, right? We all have to go through the valley of the shadow of death. And that has been the experience of people in the UK and worldwide, isn't it? We all think we'll live forever, and suddenly we might die. What's kept me going is the presence of God in the valley of the shadow of death. And I've found that makes all the difference.
Thank you. So you've mentioned your Christian faith. I mean, tell us what that, how you came to faith, and, how that has ended up making this difference for you in this time.
Yeah, I grew up in a Christian home, which always begs the question, like, or maybe you're just kind of pre-programmed to do it. That's a fair question. I think, if you grew up in an atheist home, you could be pre-programmed the other way. The key question I would invite anyone listening or watching to think about is it true? Is it true? That's why I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian because when I was a teenager, I suddenly realized, yeah, actually it is true. And I believe it's true in facing death, and it gives me hope in the face of death. Now, when I say it, what do I mean? Well, the central claim of the Christian faith, which is extremely relevant to cancer and to coronavirus, is this: if you were there on the morning of Easter Sunday, AD 33 or 34, with an iPhone, you could have recorded what the eyewitnesses say, that the stone was rolled away, and Jesus, who'd been crucified 3 days earlier, came back to life. Which is not only, if it really happened, is incredibly historically important, but it means we can know him now. We can know him now. Jesus claims in the Bible that he holds the keys of death and hell. And if you had the key to something, if you had the key to a car, you own it. So the Christian claim is that the God who made the whole universe owns death. And I find that makes all the difference. It gives me hope in the face of death.
Wonderful. And that has, is an incredible thing to hear. I mean, tell us a bit more about what it was in the first place that has convinced you. This truth. If this is true, you've talked about. What was it that really made you think this is true and I can stake my life on it?
So, in the city, right, you make investments. And when you make investments, you analyze something. That's what I did, wealth management, private banking. You don't just throw the money out the window and hope it comes back. You make an analysis. So the Christian faith is based on an analysis of what Christians believe is a series of communications from God to us, the Bible. The Bible's 66 books written over 1,500 years. What the Bible tells me, and I would say from my own experience, I believe that to be true, but you have to decide for yourself, is this: that God made the world good. He made everything good. And these three intruders, if you like, broke into the world: fear, suffering, and death. And they're wrecking it. And eventually death is going to get us, right? Even in Hampstead or Sevenoaks, it's going to get us. Now, if we look at the world that has natural evil in it, coronavirus, cancer, but if we're honest, there's also evil within each one of us. Each one of us have done things that have broken our relationship with God. Solzhenitsyn, the Russian dissident, said the line between good and evil doesn't run between countries, doesn't run between political parties. It runs down right down the middle of each one of us. And I can only speak for myself, but that's true with me. I'm a mixture of good and evil, and we all are. So the Bible tells me that the basic human problem is that not the physical death, but eternal death, separation from God because of the things that we've done wrong that have broken our relationship. But that begs the question, well, why doesn't God do something about it? And the Christian claim is that God did do something about it, and he became a human being, that the eternal creator God who made the universe 75 trillion light years across 2,000 years ago became a human being and walked the dusty streets of Palestine. And what I particularly find helpful about that, Tom, is that, to quote, there's a man called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was a German pastor who stood up against the persecution of the Jews. He was sent to a concentration camp. He was executed just before the war's end. And just before he died, he smuggled out of his jail cell a little piece of paper, and he wrote on this, "Only a suffering God can help us." Only a suffering God can help us. That's the Christian claim, that God himself suffered. Now, if there is a God who made the universe, how can he suffer? He suffered because he became a human being. And when I look at the eyewitness accounts, I read, for example, of Jesus in a garden called Gethsemane, maybe a bit like Hampstead Heath, but he was the night before he was betrayed, and he knew what was going to happen. He knew he was going to have to die. And he prayed, "Father God, if it's your will, take this cup away from me, but let not my will, but your will be done." So I believe that Jesus loved me and loves you, and that he went to the cross because that was the only way to get us back to God. Again, our problem is our relationship with God is broken. On the cross, I believe Jesus paid the bill. And what motivated him to do that? Why did he do that? I don't have a choice in my illness, but Jesus had a choice. Love, that God didn't want to leave us in the mess we're in, but came into the world and suffered for us. So for me, that makes all the difference. Now, if you're watching this, you're not a Christian, I realize there's some very big claims in that. And please poke away, be skeptical, ask Tom or me any questions you like. But that's what I believe anyway.
And is this just something we need, at that point when the doctors look us in the eye and tell us that there's a serious prognosis for us, death is staring us in the face? Is that just when we need this?
No, I think if we look at the eyewitness accounts, we see that it's not just about facing death. So being a Christian also should make a radical difference to us day to day. So it's not just about pie in the sky when we die. It's about knowing God now and being reconciled with God. So Jesus told a story about two brothers, and one brother, the younger one, said to the father, "I wish you were dead. I want your money." He probably should have been working in the city. So he took his father's money, went off, blew it all on wine, women, and song. And then a great crash came. maybe like coronavirus. And this guy was reduced to poverty, and he was, which for a Jewish boy was terrible. He was so hungry, he was reduced to longing to eat the pig food. That's all the job he could get. He couldn't get a job except caring for pigs. And then it says he came to his senses. So that's what being a Christian is like. Yes, it's about hope in the face of death, but it's also about now coming to our senses and realizing I have a problem. And then the boy says, I must go home to the father, but I'm not worthy to be a son. I'll be a slave. But even a slave is being better than in this pigsty. So in the story, he starts off home, and when he's a great way off, the father in the story, who's God, sees him, and the father runs to him and throws his arms around him, covered with pig muck, and says, "Welcome home." So that's a picture of what being a Christian is like. It's about realizing we're in a pigsty, and that this world will not satisfy us, and we need to come home. But there's a second brother in the story, and this is important because I think that's the most common misunderstanding, at least in England, that I find, because the second brother is very respectable and moral. The first brother's a banker. The second brother maybe would be an oncologist, let's say, someone everybody admires because they do a good job. And this brother's out working, and he hears this party going on, and he comes nearer the home, and he calls a servant and says, what's happening? And the servant says, "Haven't you heard your brother's come home?" And he becomes very angry, and he won't go in. And the father, God, comes out to him and says, come in, join the party. And he says, "No, you owe me. All my life I've worked for you. You never gave me anything. I'm not coming in." And that's a picture. Some of us are like the younger brother, but some of us are like the older brother. And we think, I don't need God because I never did anything wrong. And the story ends on an ambiguous note, because the younger brother realizes, I'm in the pigsty, he's home in the party. And the older brother, who thinks God owes me, I'm pretty good really, he ends up outside, and we don't know what happens. And that's the end of the story.
Wonderful. So it's about sort of that relationship with the father, even now, in the face of everything else that.
Yeah, I think also, Tom, look, we're all looking for happiness, aren't we? And a man called Augustine, who wrote about 350, 400 years after Jesus, said, "You, God, have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until we find rest in you." So even leaving aside death, which is a pretty big leave aside, right? Because we're all going to die. Even for the here and now, we will never find satisfaction. We will never find fulfillment until we get right with God.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right, isn't it? Death is the thing that we think happens to other people, isn't it? And we, until we're realizing it's going to happen to us. And but what would you say to the person who says, when you die and you just cease to be, and really the best thing to do is to just try and make the most of life now. Don't worry about the future. Enjoy what you've got while you have it. What's the point of being afraid of death? What would you say to that?
I think we're all afraid of death, unless we're completely bonkers. But yeah, there's two bets, right? You can either bet there is nothing, this life is all it is, it's all meaningless. That's our friend Richard Dawkins' view. He says the universe has nothing to say to us but utter pitiless indifference. There's no meaning to love, family, children, work, nothing. It's all utterly pointless. Enjoy life while you can. That's a consistent worldview. Or there is a God, and that God is speaking to us. This is an incredibly important question, because my contention is that each person in the world is going to meet God. In that sense, all roads lead to God, right? We're all going to meet God because I believe there is a God, and I believe he made the universe and he made each one of us. And therefore the question is, which of those true paths is true? Which is true? And if what I'm saying is true, that's more important than anything else. So all I'm asking people who are watching is have an open mind. Yeah, if you believe that the Dawkins view is true, fine. But if you believe that maybe there's something in this, please investigate it. I beg of you, because it's so important. Mm-hmm. And who would not want hope in the face of death? But hope is only useful if it's true. So if people quite often say to me, yeah, in your position, isn't it just wishful thinking? Which I understand, it's a valid question. Yeah, and that's fair enough, because the Christian faith is only useful if it's true. Otherwise, it's to quote a well-known book, it's a God delusion, right? So is it true? Is it true? Please investigate. Being a Christian is not about a leap in the dark. It's certainly not about being moral or respectable. It's about meeting a person, and it's about establishing, are the claims that Jesus makes about himself true or not? You have to decide that.
Mm.
And if you go to buy a car, what do? You go for a test drive, you kick the tires, you read reviews. Please do the same thing on the Christian faith.
Mm.
Look into it. Have an open mind.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to encourage people, if they'd like to ask some questions on the live chat. You know, you've heard some of what Jeremy's had to say. I mean, he's made it very clear. Don't hold back. You can ask about anything you like, whether it's to do with what he's spoken about, to do with his illness, or and how he's addressing that with his faith, and other things to do with that, or whether it's to do with digging into the details of why he's so confident and sure that this is true, and how this can help him in the situation that he's in, and how it might help us. So do add a question in the comments. I've got some questions to be going on with, so I'll do that, and then I'll keep a lookout for questions that may pop up. So, I mean, one thing people often say when they meet somebody who seems to have really sort of, seems to be have some confidence about these things, is they say, "Well, this is lovely. This is lovely for you. I wish I had your faith, but I don't see it like that, and I don't have it." I mean, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, fair enough. I would say, what puts you off the Christian faith? Why do you not believe it's true? And faith is, sometimes people say to me, "I wish I had your faith," as if like, I wish I was left-handed, right? Some people are born left-handed, some people are born right-handed. It's just random. But I don't think for me, or most people who are Christians, that's the case. There maybe are a few people in the world who are naturally kind of spiritual or religious. I can assure you, as a banker who worked for 35 years in the City of London, I'm not one of them. So yeah, just decide it for yourself. The claims I'm making are really radical and shocking in a way, and you must decide if they're true. As Christians, we wouldn't want to browbeat you. We're just trying to explain why we think it's true, why especially we think the resurrection happened. That's the central claim of Christianity, that one person came back from the dead. Eddie Izzard, I'm sure you have lots of Guardian readers in Hampstead. Eddie was recently interviewed in The Guardian. I actually quite like The Guardian because it's free, right? Free is good for bankers. I read it most days. And he was interviewed in The Guardian, and he said this. He said, "All my life, I Eddie, was traumatized by the death of my mother when I was 6 or 7 from cancer. And if only she or someone had come back through the clouds to tell us there's something there beyond the grave." So that longing for something beyond the grave, some answer to death, is extremely powerful. And when I read that, I was moved, because I couldn't have put it better myself, to be honest. Yeah, that is exactly the Christian claim, that one person did come back, and not only came back, but actually defeated death. So the Christian claim is this: we have the answer to death. I mean, that's an incredibly bold state claim, but yeah, we have the answer to death. And it's not about us, it's not about being good, it's about a person. It's about a person, Jesus Christ, who has defeated death and who claims, "I have the keys. I own death." In fact, the Bible says at the end, death itself will die. If we follow Jesus, if we love him and we go to be with him, then death itself will be swallowed up. And who doesn't want that? So why follow death? Why not choose life? This is not like a banker trying to con you. And there's no charge either. To be a Christian is just coming with open hands. It's not about giving money or becoming religious. No, it's about accepting a free offer of what we Christians call grace, which is just something we get that we don't deserve.
And so, I mean, plenty of religion. There's plenty of religions in the world, aren't there, that make claims about these sorts of things, and maybe are slightly different from the claims that Jesus made. Why are you so sure this is right, Christianity is right, Jesus is right, and others are wrong? Yeah.
Well, first of all, other religions have very important elements of truth in them, and I certainly think we should be on friendly terms. I mean, and especially if you look at the other great Abrahamic religions, Muslim, Islam and Judaism, we have a lot in common. I mean, Jesus appears in the Quran 9 times. In fact, Muslims believe that Jesus is the Messiah. They don't believe he's God. So if we look at our Jewish and Muslim friends, we all have Father Abraham. We share a lot, but the difference is that Christians believe that Jesus is the Son of God, which is very hard for both our Muslim and Jewish friends to accept, and I understand that. So the claim to have conquered death and the claim that God became a human being and suffered for us, those are very radical and shocking claims, which our Jewish and Muslim friends wouldn't believe. Now, if we look at Eastern religions or something, that's different. I mean, you can argue that Buddhism isn't really a religion at all. It's a way of life. But in terms of the other great monotheistic religions, we should be friendly and love and chat to them in a really kindly way. But what's the difference? The difference is who's Jesus. And Jews would believe that no, the Messiah is yet to come, and Muslims would believe actually Jesus is the Messiah, but he's not God. So that's the Christian claim. That's why we believe he rose from the dead.
Wonderful, thank you. There's a few questions coming up here. So are there any particular Bible passages that have been meaningful for you through this time?
Yeah, just a few. In fact, I'm doing a daily, I could bore you for hours on that, Tom. So I'm doing a daily series of devotions, actually 20 devotions from the Bible on that. And I think, the 23rd Psalm is amazing. The Lord's my shepherd, I shall not want. I mean, basically there's two shepherds in life, right? There's God, the loving Father, or there's death, right? Basically, either follow death or follow life. I love the verse at the end of the 23rd Psalm. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me every day of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. So as a Christian, where are we going? We're going home. We're going home. And walking through the valley of the shadow of death, we have God with us. Then if I look at the New Testament, I love some of the eyewitness account stories of Jesus. For example, that Jesus has a friend called Lazarus, and Jesus lets him die. He gets ill. His disciples say, aren't you going to go and cure him? No, he just waits. And Lazarus has been dead for 4 days when Jesus eventually rocks up. And Lazarus has got these two sisters, and they're very sad and also, frankly, annoyed. They're angry. They have a mixture of feelings, and maybe we feel like that. And one of them, Martha, says to Jesus, don't you, if you'd been here, Lazarus wouldn't have died. And Jesus makes an incredible claim to her. He says, I'm the resurrection and I'm the life. So and then he says, do you believe this? And she says yes, but she has a mixture of feelings, because on the one hand she says yes, but then a few minutes later Jesus says, okay, roll the stone away because I'm going to raise Lazarus from the dead. And she says, no, hang on a minute, don't do that because he's going to smell, right? So when we read these eyewitness accounts, we see which is very like us. We see a mixture of faith and also of doubt. So I love that claim of Jesus, I'm the resurrection and I'm the life. And that for me encapsulates the fact that there is an answer to death, because this human unwillingness to think about death is really strong. And that's why coronavirus it shakes people, because we normally think about all kinds of things that might happen to us, right? Relationships we might get into, jobs we might get, children we might have, places we might travel. There's nothing wrong with that, may or may not happen. But the one thing that we're absolutely sure of is going to die, we do not want to think about. Benjamin Franklin, who was one of the founding fathers, said, you can avoid everything in life except death and taxes. Having worked in private banking, I tell you that's not altogether true, right? Well, I'm sure everybody in Hampstead is up to date with their tax returns. They can't avoid death. What's the death rate watching this? 100%. 100%. So I love that claim of Jesus, I'm the resurrection and I'm the life.
Thank you so much. This is really helpful. So we've got a few more questions coming in. So, I mean, one question here. Thank you for sharing your faith with us. What part in your life did your faith play before your diagnosis?
Yeah, I was a Christian before, and I would say probably not a big enough not a big enough part. And if you're watching this and you're a Christian and you think, oh, I'd love to be, more able to share my faith, then getting cancer is a good way of doing it. I wouldn't wish cancer on anyone. But what happened to me when I had cancer was, it was an acid test. Do I really believe it? Do I really believe it? Because it's one thing to go to church and, go through the kind of formalities of religion, but is it really true? Is it really true? So that brought the reality home. And the other thing it helped me is to think, what do I want to do in the short time I've got left? I love to do this, to be honest. If I was sitting here with a cure for coronavirus, I had a vaccine and I didn't tell anyone, that would be crazy, wouldn't it? That would be really evil, in fact. No, if you discovered a cure or a vaccine for coronavirus, you'd be twittering and telling everybody, wouldn't you? I've got the answer. So that's what difference it's made to me. I just love to tell people about Jesus.
Wonderful. And the question here about what's it feel like to feel the presence of God and of Jesus in this time. So David here says, I had a pretty severe knee injury a couple of years ago, and also experienced a heightened presence of Jesus during the first few hours. What does it feel like for you to experience his presence? What do we mean when we're talking about that?
Yeah. Cancer is a very lonely disease. Like when I was in the hospital, I was in a room on my own. The only people I saw were nurses or doctors. No one could come and visit me. Even when I'm doing chemo, normally my wife comes along, but you just sit there all day. It's lonely. So what is it? I never had a kind of supernatural vision or anything. Again, I'm a banker, right? I'm not really a person prone to the sort of fanciful. And I remember what Jesus said. So when I read the words that I believe God wrote to us, the Bible, then they come alive. I'll never leave you or forsake you. That's the promise as a Christian, that God will never leave us alone, even and especially in the face of death. Because death, what's death? Death is separation, isn't it? It's loneliness. Because we're going off on our own and we're leaving behind all our family and friends. But as a Christian, we're never alone. Never. Will God forsake us? No, never. Never, never, never. He's with us, and we can rely on him. He's trustworthy. That's a big question in cancer. Yeah, does God exist? And if he exists, what's he like? I would tell you, friends, he's trustworthy.
And it's great to hear you with that confidence. I mean, how do you reconcile the idea of God being loving and having power, over your life's events, with the fact that you have suffered? How can a loving God allow the suffering you're experiencing?
But that's a very profound question, and one that people have wrestled with. I'm not sure I have 100% answer to that. I think there are philosophical answers, and the Bible has theological answers. But really, my answer to that is not an intellectual framework. It's a person who walked the dusty streets of Palestine 2,000 years ago, and he went through suffering much worse than me because he loved me. So how do I know that God loves me? Because he died for me, and I believe he died for you. And God would be quite just in throwing us away, because we've all sinned, the Bible says, and fallen short of the glory of God. Each one of us. God doesn't owe us anything. We've all done things, terrible things that are wrong. But the wonderful news is that God doesn't want anyone to perish. God doesn't want anyone to be separated eternally from him, but he wants everyone to come to faith. So how do I reconcile a loving God with the reality of the world as we see it? I reconcile that on the cross. Because what I see there is a human being, and also God suffering in my place and creating a way out. Otherwise it's hopeless. Literally, it's hopeless. There's no answer. We're all doomed. But the cross shows there is an answer to suffering.
Yeah, thank you. And as you say, these are big questions, and some of them we could talk all night about them, couldn't we? In one sense, questions like that, and if people want to look into that question further, there may be other resources we can point to as well. And I mean, how would you encourage Christians who feel who kind of are facing suffering and maybe are feeling fearful and are struggling to articulate perhaps things as clearly as you have articulated, and might sort of think, oh, is there something wrong with me? And if I'm lacking in faith, what would you say to them?
Yeah, no, look, first of all, please don't think there's anything amazing about me. Not at all. I struggle as well. I often think, why me? Why not somebody else? So that's to be human, isn't it? So please don't think I'm some kind of like super Christian who just floats along. No, it's very hard. It's very, very hard. The last month has been awful. The impact being in hospital and thinking, I've got coronavirus on my family, has been really tough. I would, in a case like that, I would refer someone to I always go to the same place, which is the Bible. And there's a wonderful story for someone who's like that, which is Jesus in the storm. So one day Jesus says to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they get in the boat. And these disciples are mainly experienced fishermen. This is like normal life, right? Just going through life, perfectly normal. And Jesus goes to sleep. And in the middle of the lake, a tremendous storm blows up and the boat starts to sink. And the disciples are full of fear and panic stricken. And Jesus is still asleep. And what do they do in the storm? They doubt. They doubt God's character. Maybe some people watching this doubt that God even exists. But if you think, well, I'm a Christian, or maybe I am, we may doubt what God's like, because they roughly shake him and wake him up and say, don't you care if we're going to drown? And Jesus gets up and he stills the storm with a word. And then something strange happens, because in the mill pond calmness, with not a breath of wind, a few seconds earlier, it's been, like a hurricane, and only God can do that, right? That it then says something strange. It says the disciples were even more afraid. They're even more afraid in the mill pond calmness than in the raging storm. Why? Because it began to dawn on them who was in their boat. It began to dawn on them that this ordinary looking rabbi was actually more than met the eye. And what's the answer then in our fear, which I certainly experience? It's to know God more. And I would also say that when the disciples got out of the boat on the other side of the lake, shaking, dripping wet, they knew far more about God than if they just had a Sunday afternoon picnic sail across the lake. So if you're a Christian, you've got Jesus in your boat, but you need to know him more. You need to know him and experience him, not know about him, but know him more. And if you do, the bigger fear of God, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, will drive out the fear of death. And if you're not a Christian, invite him into your boat. In fact, he wants to come into your boat. He's inviting himself. And have him in the boat, because eventually the boat is going to sink, right? We're all going to die. And what does Jesus do in the story? He brings them to the other side. That's what he offers to us, to bring us to the other side through death itself. So yeah, if you're feeling afraid, it's not a sin to be afraid. It's natural. Yeah. But what we need to know the Jesus in our boat.
Thank you so much. So, last question, really, last big question. How, if somebody's hearing this for the first time, or wants to take things further, what would you recommend they do? Yeah.
So, Tom, please either, if you've got a Christian friend who's invited you along, just ask them questions. It's as simple as that. And if you think, actually, I think my Christian friend's a bit of an idiot, I don't really think they know much about anything, then ask Tom, right? So the church is not about preaching morality. We're a group of people who have met someone and we want to share what he's like. And if you're not sure what he's like, or if he even exists, then please ask questions, be skeptical. I think, Tom, you're going to run a course, right? Where people can come and ask questions, and we're just seeking for truth. We're seeking truth. We're seeking hope in the face of death, and come and decide for yourself if it's true.
Thank you so much. And we'd love to encourage you to, as Jeremy said, talk to a Christian friend. That's probably the most important thing you can do. Find a Christian that you know and ask them why they believe what they believe. If you want to get in touch with us directly and ask, me that question or whatever, if you go onto our website and you go onto the COVID Conversations page, which is just sjdh.org/cc, then if you go there, you can give your contact details, and I can get in touch with you, and I'd love to chat. And as Jeremy said, we hope, after we've done this series of conversations for 4 weeks, we hope to do a very short series of sort of 3 evenings, which will be more discussion based, and where we come together maybe on Zoom or something like that, and just give a chance to open the Bible and really look together at what it means to be a Christian, and what Christians base their faith on, and whether these things are true, and whether that could be true for you. So we will have more details about that. But the next thing to come back to would be, come and join us on a Sunday here on the YouTube channel on Sunday morning at 10:30. Our website also has details about how to join our evening service, which takes place on Zoom on a Sunday. So again, go to our website, sjdh.org, which has all the details that you need, and then come back a week today. So Thursday next week, 8 o'clock, we'll have our second COVID conversation, and that is with Sir Jeremy Cook, who is a former High Court judge. And we're going to be digging into the evidence with him, and whether the evidence for Christianity stands up in court.
Yeah, one other thing, Tom, sorry, I forgot to mention it, so I can just plug my book, which sadly I don't make any money from. It's called Beyond the Big C. It just came out. It's a kind of expanded version. I just said it's very small. It's aimed at people who wouldn't call themselves Christians, and it's just my story of cancer. And if you want, that's another way to explore it further. And I'm sure Tom would be happy to send you a copy if you want.
Yeah, certainly. Please do get in touch if you'd like to. I think you might find it on Amazon, or I think that's right, isn't it? And
yeah, or Amazon, or 10 of Those is the publisher. Yeah.
So the website 10ofthose.com. For The Big C by Jeremy Marshall tells more of Jeremy's story. So it just remains to say thank you so much, Jeremy. There's a number of people here on the chat just expressing their gratitude for what you've been saying, and your encouraging answers to all these questions that have been flung at you this evening. We're really grateful to you. We as a church will certainly be praying for you, and we're really encouraged to hear you speak of the things you've said this evening, and we'd love others who've been hearing these things to know that same faith and confidence in the face of all that life throws at us, that you've been sharing by putting trust in Jesus. So thank you for this evening, and I'm going to wrap up there.